Yeah, so folks, if you can come up, Nicholas coming this way, good to see you. Take a seat. Everyone should have a... Wherever you like, it's okay. All right. So take a seat, folks, it's okay. The point of this conversation really is to recognize the economics of this stuff, right? If you're going to build a new platform technology, if that's the right word for it, but certainly an open, interoperable set of technologies that the world can use, you necessarily have to deal with, open source, non-profit structures. But we also know that ecosystems that develop and bring vibrant activity, they need the drive of good old American and every other country's, entrepreneurship and for-profit enterprises. So this is going to be a conversation about that because we see the first-person project, the first-person network as well as being a foundational layer upon which this broader economy is going to build. So the challenges of that are what we're all about here. And I think each of these people bring a really interesting, different perspective on that. I'm just going to launch straight into it. You guys can, as you go through it, give us a little bit of a bio, but I'd prefer to just go straight into the questions and in the process, just let us know what you do. So, look, I think I'll go to you first, Nick, because you are literally deploying capital into this space as an investor. And you have a direct interest in making sure that there's a return on that capital, but you also understand the importance of these open systems. So how do you find the balance in terms of your investment priorities, and what is your advice to people who are building specifically in this area of decentralized trust and identity?
Yeah, so Nicholas Racz, Key State Capital. We've had a thesis around digital trust now for about 4 years. We really, and it's funny, you mentioned platforms. We actually intentionally went protocol first and then toward platforms from there. These sorts of design decisions are really, really important. You don't want to have to reinvent the wheel after it is, you don't want a square wheel, you want a properly designed wheel. So when you deploy capital, these are decisions you have to make. We did a lot of research into the field. We've made an entire map called the Web of Trust map, weboftrust.org. You can go check it out. It's an entire visual of all the connections in digital identity and verifiable credentials, DID, VC, and all the standards that are associated. So we really wanted to make sure that the foundation, the technical foundation we were building on, was valid before then just wantonly throwing cash around. But it's a whole process, and maybe... what would you like me to speak on?
Yeah, actually, why don't we just throw to David, because I think this might give us some great context here, because David, you are an entrepreneur in the space, and you're building pro-privacy tech. Maybe give us a little bit of the story about what Databench is about and what Max is about. But I think, you and I had a conversation recently about this challenge of figuring out, okay, the business model that we've seen in Silicon Valley for the last, 20-odd years has been extract all the data, own all the data, and exploit that, and that's how you make money. That's obviously not going to be part of your operation. So then it's what is your business model? How do you go about that? So maybe just talk a little bit about what the product is you're building, but then how do you balance that tension?
Sure. Thanks, Michael. It's an absolute privilege to be up here.
Also, Aussies aren't trying to take over the world here, guys, just in case you're wondering. But you're going to hear a few Aussie accents here. But carry on, David.
It's very, very easy for us in one sense and very difficult in another sense, in that the mission for what we're trying to achieve is really simple in creating zero knowledge architecture. So we actually don't want to know what our customers are doing. When we talk to investors, they sort of say, how are you going to compete out there on the world stage? And we say, well, because we're building a new category, because we're redefining what it means to go online, we actually don't want to know what we're doing with our customers. So therefore, we're not actually competing with the traditional players out there. So for investors, they find that very difficult to get their head around. They go, well, how are you going to make money? And for us, it's about building trust over time. It's about building relationships with our user base. And then over about 2 or 3 years, we'll eventually start to see that the trust comes in and people are prepared to pay for subscriptions to use our services, because that's the only way that we're going to make money. But for us, making money up front is not the most important sort of driver for us. Going viral is not the most important driver for us, because then that would create the perception that we're going down the same path as other large commercialised operations, and we don't want to do that. So, when Michael and I have chatted a few times, it's about, well, is the most important thing for you to make money, or is the most important thing for you to create a new category of, human experiences, and what does it mean to go online? And we say it's not about making money up front. Of course we have to, because if we don't survive. It's about trying to make investors happy, but they have to know that when you make a new category, when you forge forward in ways that no one else has, you have to have faith, and you have to have trust, and you have to play the long game. And the majority of VCs, the majority of family offices don't operate by those rules. So if you want to forge forward, and you want to make new categories, and you want to provide new products and services and outputs and outcomes for people out there who really do believe in self-sovereign identity and what does it mean to go online, you have to play the long game. And that's a very difficult conversation to have, certainly with investors.
I think it's a really interesting point, right? Because if you just, the long game, right? Because unfortunately, we have a fast-paced economic cycle that demands this return immediately. But at the end of the day, give Jeff Bezos credit where it's due, played the long game on Amazon and eventually proved that he would be profitable on a model that I don't necessarily think we should be replicating, but nonetheless, it is this idea that establish this system, this network, this ecosystem, and then it grows.
Well, and the games that are being played in terms of economic deployment and recouping of economic resources, I think, and how they're embedded at different scales is something that we really have to have a more sophisticated knowledge of this. And I'll let you speak, Sheila, but I would just say it's inherently tied with governance, because you have, again, public, private, these sort of binary relationships, but we know they're not necessarily binary. They're entangled in so many different ways, and they interact in so many different ways as well. So actually recognizing what domain of authority is where, what is the agent, what is the human, right? And how do they crosswise interact is something that the monetizable vectors will come from there. Okay,
Sheila, speaking of these just bringing these sort of different players together under a governance structure. You've had a lot of experience in not-for-profit organizations, the World Economic Forum, the Council on Crypto Innovation, and now Project Liberty, and now you're helping us out at Advanced AI Society. But each one of these things is intersecting very directly with entities that are for-profit, and there's a sort of a cat herding challenge to that. So what are basically your takeaways from all of that experience, and sort of how this new emergent ecosystem could find that balance in the right way?
Yeah, where to begin? So 25 years herding cats, I would say, is really how I would describe the 25 years of my career in civic tech, law, policy, ethics, et cetera. There's a long-standing conversation that happens in parallel to a lot of the conversations we all are privileged to be part of, like this one, around the deployment of capital. What is the role? Who should be the patient capital? Should that be venture money? Should it be philanthropic capital? How do we combine these different sources of funding? How do we think about things like funding the commons? I know David's here somewhere. How do we think about these various projects and what they mean for our social architecture, right, and our public architecture? But I actually think that some of that conversation is a little cart before horse, because I really want to go back, David, to something you said, which is I think, and I've thought for a while, that we have to talk about growth and scale very differently. And when I was at the World Economic Forum, you mentioned that, rang that bell. So one of the many hats I wore there is I oversaw what's called the Tech Pioneers Program, it started off as a program to identify future unicorns. And while I was there, in the 5-6 years I was at the forum, that became identifying the next decacorns. Right? And I watched that transition happen in terms of expectations for growth and what growth should look like and what exits should look like and what was reasonable to anticipate in terms of the money you were putting in somewhere. And that is a completely different model. Like, you're thinking very differently when you're in that realm than when you're in like I'm spreading a lot of bets kind of model and your expectations there. But also, I think that is very linear growth. It's very constrained growth to a particular model. And what I think is when it comes to scale, we have to start thinking about that differently. So it's not just I'm going going to have one instance, everyone's going to use it, and I'm going to take it and I'm going to translate the language and everyone's going to be very happy with the thing, like the Facebook kind of model, right? It is, I'm going to have a project almost, right? A protocol or whatever it is. And people are going to take that thing and do a lot of different things with it, which may not even be recognizable that the underlying technology is consistent. This is really what open source was about from the original, looking at Phil, others like, right? This is exactly, we're going back to that ethos. But it won't always be recognizable and connected into the thing that you funded. And so getting funders to understand that and to come together in convening is where they get, like, we are funding a broad scale transformative foundational brick. That brick is going to be used to do all kinds of things, many of which we may not like or understand or even possibly have foreseen. It's quite a journey. And what I'm finding is that a lot of the capital is a bit stuck in older ways of thinking, and technologists are moving ahead, faster and faster and faster every day. Vibe coding happening even faster than ever before. And there's a disconnect happening there that I think is extraordinarily fundamental and really problematic.
So I would like, yes, why not? Hey! You know why? Sheila and I do a podcast together, and I'm always having to bow down to her. She's
I'm not Aussie, but I
yeah. The only thing I've got going is the Aussie accent. I've got some stories about that one. But anyway, look, I think what's really interesting about where this conversation has landed is, and where I want to take it now, we can just narrow this down to the First Person Project, right? It is a collective of people working in what is inherently not for profit, but to build the network, to make sure that issuers of credentials are all bought into it, that there is governance to it all. Somebody has to pay people to do this, right? And so what basically I think Sheila and Nicholas, you wearing the investor hat, Sheila, give us the angle again from the not-for-profit perspective. What is the right strategy for them, right? How can this group of people doing this very important work continue to fund themselves and at the same time enable all these companies? H2H, by the way, we think of ourselves as one of the very first, if not the first, for-profit companies sitting on top of this network, and we want them to survive, right? So, and we want them to thrive, more importantly. So, yeah, maybe talk through a little bit about this project, and what would you see as the best path forward for bringing capital into it?
Well, I think it would be wise to understand that this notion of a decentralized trust graph is quite foundational, and it kind of converges on this notion of reputation, which is an extremely hairy problem to solve. And in this way, if you're a for-profit entity and you want to, say, find a level of assurance about who you're actually marketing toward and who you're trying to reach. In my mind, it's like this is already going toward this sort of post-advertising regime of essentially finding consumers for your products, right? Embedding affordances within the decentralized trust graph, right? So not just people, but actually products or functions you can call on which can autonomously live in this space. Right. There's a ton of implications here of why this goes beyond platforms as we know them. Again, this sort of protocol first approach, and then the services that are built on top. And I'm really optimistic actually that if we can get the game theory of this reputation graph correct, everything else unlocks. And this sort of, again, I think the goal here, and I'm straying beyond my investor's hat, so excuse me, but I think the binary domain of classification where you're either this or that is something that we're gonna have to mediate, right? This whole you're for profit or you're not for profit, right? If you can have a nuanced discussion about the roles that you're playing rather than just this or that, there's more value to be found in that sort of relationship. So.
Yeah.
So there is a profound movie called Frozen 2. Those who have young children will be familiar with this. I have 3 daughters. And there's a song in this movie that I think about a lot. And I think it's called The Next Right Thing. And so when I talk to any builder I'm talking to right now, what I say is we are in a time where we can't even keep up with the pace. Our human brains cannot keep up with the pace of change, right? And that is a change that's not just happening in the agentic space. It's not just because of vibe coding. It is in just the chaos of the broader economy, the macro, every macro that we can look at is indicators, is just futurists are all freaking out right now, right? For good reason. So all we can really do is take a brick by brick strategy. We have to build the next right thing. We have to fund the next right thing. And the next right thing, we're not going to know what it is till the previous right thing has been built and deployed. And so it's a patience that I think, we talk about patient capital a lot, but it's a patience also in the builder space. Because of course everybody wants to win. I mean, we are talking about capitalism on this stage right now, let's be real, okay? So everybody wants to win, everybody wants the decacorn, everybody wants the exit, everybody wants the whatever it is they want out of the thing that they're doing, right? I like to think that in this room, we all care about the right thing more than we care about the profitable thing or the critical, the funding thing. But we care about the right thing. But it's just really hard to know what that is. So it's step by step, it's brick by brick. And I think with FPP, what I've said to all of you and will continue to say is, we're on the right path with this.
Sheila, you also summoned another movie.
Did I?
The Lego movie.
Oh,
Brick by brick.
Composability.
Composability, exactly right.
Crypto people know that joke, right? Legos.
Yeah, this is exactly right. Like, who is doing what piece? And so like I say, I think convenings like this, I think recognizing that there are going to be people you don't even know at this current moment who happen to be working on a different piece of the thing you have to connect to, and trying to figure out places where those folks are coming together and what are they doing and how can we create different compositions. And again, that's the thing. There's not just one Lego structure. The contrast to the Lego movies they build about, you're not going to have the giant Megatron at the end. You're going to have a million little Megatrons running around that are all doing a thing that's necessary in the community, in the locus where they're situated. And that, I think, is, again, it's a mindset shift that I think is very natural to everyone in this room, but really is not natural to a lot of people outside of our spaces.
I want to come back to that because there's sort of this idea of creating this scaffolding almost for all of this ecosystem to grow, I think is really, really important. But before we do, David, bring you in back here again, because something Tricia said about change and the speed of it, we can't separate, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, whatever it is, there is this inherent drive that comes from the version of capitalism that we live in, right? There is this quarterly returns that we have to get. There are VCs that are looking, not to knock the VCs here, but to looking for that ROI. They want the 100x and so forth. And I think, to me, one of the most striking news developments of the last week or so was Peter Steinberger, from the founder of OpenClaw. He's been acqui-hired essentially by OpenAI. We don't know what that deal was, but we know that people were talking about $1 billion worth of thing. And he produced this thing in 82 days. He was this could be, if the numbers are right, the very first single-person $1 billion exit in only 82 days. So what we've done is actually accelerated this cycle that is exhausting, because it's not just the technology that's moving fast, it's also the competitive demands. So again, just you're putting yourself out there and saying it's not about the money, at least at this stage. How do you talk to VCs? And do you find VCs who are going, it's okay, we're happy to take the patient, slow approach here?
No.
No.
But on the positive side, it does give you healthy pressure to actually perform and to progress what your tech roadmap looks like. And the reason why I say that is that we've got some early stage investors who are very faithful and very dedicated, but they do put pressure on us to put runs on the table, which is a healthy, positive attitude to bring to work. So, for example, in the spirit of the first person project, and for those in the room that don't know what we're doing, so we've built a zero knowledge architecture browser where we want to create opportunities for people to redefine what it means to go online. So what we're doing is we're about to kick off a pilot where we're going to call it the family bubble, private environment, where mum and dad could have children and they've got multiple devices, 4 children, 20, 30 devices, in the house. It could be, laptops and phones and all sorts of things. So mum and dad would have some sort of an account with us, and then they'd issue, an invitation to all the children and all the devices. And they'd come into a private family bubble. So essentially that means that group is invisible to the outside world, but they can be online and they can do whatever they want to do. And that's the sort of thing that a family, if they felt excited about, would pay a subscription for. So therefore, that's how a company like us would generate revenue. So because we've got pressure from our investors to actually perform, we come up with these ideas and we start putting these things on the table. So it does have a positive side. And it does make you perform faster than what you would like to, but at the same time, we'd prefer to go a little bit slower.
How do you, when you get that sort of a pitch, Nicholas, what's your reaction?
Well, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because we really had to learn all of the lessons from the ground up. A very young investor group came from crypto, came into an equity. And so with a new technology, a fundamentally new approach toward digital identity, and it's reaping the rewards, but the temptation to tackle so many different verticals all at once with no focus. The friction there is so essential, right? When you have these exuberant bursts of capital just flowing, right, and people just investing because I think this is a good idea, not actually validating the idea and constraining really how you use capital, it produces monsters, and this is how bubbles form, and this is how crashes happen. I mean, this is again how Jeff Bezos made it through the 2000 bubble, right? Because he saw the core numbers increasing, and the stock goes up and then go all the way down and then oscillate back and forth. And so there's this notion here, and I think we talked about this earlier, really, about how with these new accounting mechanisms, which hash chain data structures, not just blockchain, but hash chain data structures in general, can actually push us toward a more real-time representation of real economic value, and then that these sort of primitives will actually lead toward new types of digital assets, not just digitizing assets that we already know, right? This sort of triple entry accounting mechanism that we talked about.
Yeah. I mean, and maybe one of the benefits of AI in this is that it can move that process fast enough that the capacity to reap those gains from that development actually can, be brought into this human demand, which actually is much slower than AI, right?
Absolutely.
So Sheila, I just want to land here because we've had the word crypto and blockchain mentioned twice now, and it'd be remiss to dive into it because I think the lessons from the crypto space are so important, right? And you and I have been in it for quite a while, and we've seen its ups and downs, and Nicholas uses the word exuberance, right? And I think we've seen bubbles of exuberance non-stop in the crypto space, and it is, to my mind, regardless of where I've landed in this journey, I still believe that at its heart there is something absolutely wonderful about the distributed ownership that a crypto concept brings, and therefore that the incentives could be that by tokenizing ownership of these public assets, we have a way in which everybody gets to participate rather than a very concentrated capital model. The problem I've seen, and I just want you to think about this because you've seen it even bigger kind of worldview on it, is that we inadvertently created silos all over again, right? Because each blockchain had its own token, had its own degen speculative mob that were obsessed about this, and they became sort of the drivers of value. So we've got 2 minutes left. I want you to say, what are the lessons from that? Because how do we create interoperability, right? That buys into this idea of common ownership and tokenized efficiencies and capacity, but at the same time doesn't sort of create these silos.
Yeah, well, there's that meme that goes around every now and then that's it's the Drake meme, and so it's centralized technology, decentralized technology, re-centralized decentralized technology, right? And is that inevitable? Does it need to be inevitable? And what does it really mean when you have that concentration of power and resources? But I actually want to talk, and I'll answer the question in this way because it ties into what I wanted to say, which is about accountability. And one thing I really loved about what both of you gentlemen said, and I think you said this even more, David, in our prep, is that your loyal investors, your early kind of seed and everybody else, they're holding you accountable to what you're doing, not to the financials, right? They want to see that. They want to see this be viable and sustainable and all the things that mean that it's a going concern for obvious reasons. But they're really holding you accountable to something else. And you said the same thing in a different way, which is that the community can itself generate, the support of a community, support of whether it's a community of investors or community of funders, is also creating an accountability around doing that thing. And I think where some of crypto, not all of crypto, as you know, I feel, Michael, got lost is when they flipped the accountability and to what they were feeling accountable for. And when it became token price, well, then everything got distorted instantly, and we never really came back from that. And a giant part of crypto, I would say at this point, we won't get percentages, but it just gets bigger and bigger, is now embedded in that kind of token price thinking, which is really problematic because I think for those of us who are OG in that space, many people in this room as well, or OG open source or any of these things, that was not the predicate premise, right, of why we all got into this. Indeed, shout out. That was not the reason we all got into this in the first place. So all of these these things are distortionary. And that's why I like to think about this in time scale. Like, even as we are looking at AI acceleration, how can crypto or blockchain or digital assets or tokens or stable coins or all the different various, or identity, whatever it is, how can that help mitigate, some of that and create the transparency that can create accountability, and then we can kind of have this feedback within the systems themselves. All of that's really important. But I think fundamentally it is about, at the same time, having that very, very long now, type of time frame and thinking about like the future in that way, but also being very, very present in a way that is, again, what is that next step? What is that next thing that I need to do, my project needs to do, my community needs to do, and how am I checking that, gut checking that, and sense checking it with a community of like-minded or other individuals, some critics, who are able to kind of in real time give me feedback to help me ensure that I'm staying true to all of those principles and that vision.
Just to speak on that, there will always be a human in the loop.
Yeah, we want human to be authorizing and in charge as well as being in the loop, but you're right, there's always going to be there.